shouldn't be cheerful about using punishment. But to respond to that by denying that crime's an issue is to give it as an issue to the sadists. And that was the history of American crime control. Now, the good news is we've gotten a lot smarter about how to do criminal justice. This is something that the public and the politicians and the press are completely unaware of. But policing is a much more intelligent activity now than it was in 1965, maybe not as much in Chicago as in other places. But a lot of places we're getting a lot smarter about how to do policing. We now have some knowledge about how to do community corrections, probation, and parole, which we're mostly not using, but I expect that to be the next revolution. So we could have a lot less crime and a lot less punishment than we have now, using techniques we've already developed. So that's my excitement. It's also my source of frustration that we're currently enduring a lot of completely avoidable suffering. The suffering of victimization, the suffering of crime avoidance costs, and the suffering of incarceration, because we're not doing some fairly commonsensical things that we already know how to do. The criminal justice system needs to learn what everyone who successfully raised a child or trained a puppy or coached a sports team or managed an office knows about changing human behavior. That people will more or less do what you tell them to if the rules are clear, if they're transparently fair, and if breaking the rules leads to predictable and immediate consequences. And if you do all of that, the consequences don't have to be severe. You don't have to whack your kid to get him to change behavior. A timeout will do just fine as long as it happens consistently. Right. Now, the notion that swift and certain is more effective than severe is not at all a new idea. Cesare Beccaria wrote it down in 1740. It wasn't clear why it was true. We now know from stuff in psychology and behavioral economics about the defects in human decision-making that mean that immediate and high-probability consequences are overweighted compared to deferred and lower probability consequences. Now, it's hard to get swiftness and certainty into the process of punishing most kinds of crime because you don't detect it, right? I mean, how do you make burglary punishment swift and certain? You mostly don't see the burglar. How do you make drunk driving punishment swift and certain? Most people who drive drunk don't get caught at it this time. But once you've caught somebody, once you've got somebody under probation or parole supervision, well, then the due process requirements are much less. And then you can do what Judge Alm did in Hawaii, which is tell a bunch of meth-using, mostly property criminals, that they had to stop using meth. Not that they had to go to treatment. They had to stop using meth. And he was going to subject them to random drug testing. And he promised them that every time they showed up dirty or didn't show up for a test, they'd spend a couple days in jail. And 80% of them straightened up and flew right. In South Dakota, there's a program called Sobriety 24/7, which is for second-time convicted drunk drivers, though they're now expanding it, where they're not being told, don't drink and drive. They're being told, don't drink. And they have to come in twice a day for a breathalyzer. Or if they live too far away for that, they can wear a bracelet that detects alcohol in their sweat. And it works. Cuts down on their rearrest. It's cut down on drunk driving fatalities pretty massively. So they're now expanding it to other crimes that people commit while drunk, like domestic violence. They're also expanding it to other drugs other than alcohol. So basically integrating the same sort of hope approach. The testing technology is different. But the idea of having a clear rule, enforcing it every time with a mild sanction, it's the same idea. That's the way to reduce drug-related crime and the size of the drug markets. Most of the people who buy most of the hard drugs are in the criminal justice system. We know their names. If we can stop them from using, we can take away the dealer's best customers. If we want to do something for Mexico, reduce the amount of money that goes to Mexico to fuel their civil war from our drug users, that's the way to do it. First rule of duck hunting. go where the ducks are. I'm an optimist. Not usually, but I'm optimistic about this. I think under state budget pressure, saving money is the least good reason I can think of for reducing the prison headcount, but it's politically quite potent. And the fact that doing good community supervision on the Hope model both reduces crime and saves money, I think is going to make it take off. And I think that's the way to have less crime and less punishment. So I'm very optimistic that over the next year or so we'll have 2 or 3 Hope replications that demonstrate, yeah, it doesn't just work in Hawaii, it really works. And that once it's established, I think it'll spread relatively quickly. So I'm still claiming that 10 years from now we might actually have half as much crime and half as many people in prison. I think that's reachable.